Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever.
Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching. Hello, Amanda.
Hey, Marie, how are you?
Oh, so good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I love these days that we get to see each other and record this podcast. I just have to tell you.
Best. And I'm also excited to get real nerdy today and just
that's the plan.
Into one of the first things that we really, really dove into here on this podcast and in Brave New Teaching in general. And that's assessment. Everybody pause for the shock and awe. Assessment.
No.
Just kidding. Said nobody ever. But here's the thing with assessment, everybody. And I already know Amanda agrees with me because, we do this all the time. Assessment is legitimately the most important part when you're looking at data and metrics of education. If you don't know what they've learned through assessing it, then what are you doing? I hear myself, right? I know that education is so much more than that, but let's talk about the game we're all playing here. This is the outcome. It's assessment.
I know. And I can say that from the point of view of hating data. I hate it. I hate the whole idea of what it does to my brain. I'm missing parts of my brain when it comes to anything numeric. Ask me anything and I will go into a shell about it. But at the same time, that's also why I think I avoided it for so long. And I avoided finding the kinds of assessments that were going to be what's good for my students. I guess an analogy I could use here would be I don't love to cook for myself. I don't, and I never have been much of a chef. I really enjoy good food and whatever, but I don't like to do it. But I know that when I cook at home and I eat good food, I feel better. And I know when I design assessments that make sense and then I use the information from them for my students, it's good for the health of our class. It's good for the health of the direction that we're moving. Everything feels better when your assessments are lined up properly, effectively.
This is a very small piece of the larger picture that we'll be talking about today, which are the biggest mistakes that we both have made and that we continually see our colleagues and our friends and just others making when it comes to assessing students, specifically when it comes to the most important part of assessment. Summative assessments are not that important. I said it. Summative assessments are not that important, especially if they are not lined up properly with formative assessments. Formative assessments are so much more critical than the end all be all. And I will die on that. That is my absolute truth. Okay. There, podcast over. Mic drop. Just kidding.
I would say let's put it on a shirt, but who would wear that?
We could put it on a tote bag to bring to a bookstore where a lot of teachers will be.
Can you imagine showing up to NCTE and being the summative doesn't matter?
The summative is dead.
The summative is dead.
The summative is dead.
I suggested that the literary analysis essay was dead a year ago, and I had people fighting me.
No,
but
legitimately.
I think it lines up with what you just said. So,
well, yeah, but long live the formative is what I have to say.
Long live the formative.
Down with the summative. Well, that's why we wrote down with the reading quiz.
7% of the population that would get that. Yeah,
exactly. But you know what? They would really get it.
And there are people.
Yes. Okay, we have so much to talk about today, and I'm excited to dive in. So let's just do it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. Okay, seriously though, summative assessments are stupid.
Okay, all right.
Because they're just showboaty if and when you have not properly formatively assessed. Truly, it's the same thing to me as like the college class that you really don't have to attend. All you have to do is read the book, take a midterm, take a final. Yeah. Those are summatives. Like, that's it. And that is for a very specific population of learners that can succeed that way. I am not part of that population. Most people are not part of that population.
I think I am. I think I thrived in that environment.
But I did not.
I understood it until much, much, much later that was systematically set up benefiting me.
I was able to succeed. Don't get me wrong. I succeeded in that environment.
I know you did.
But I did not thrive.
Yeah.
I could not tell you what I learned because I didn't learn jack diddly. I regurgitated, and then that was it. Because now I look back and I try to like remember, and I'm like, I didn't learn half of that crap. I just, bleh, and then it was out.
I guess I should say in English, I was very, very motivated by like, I'm an Enneagram 3, right? I'm an achiever. And like my end all be all goal of my life was to become an English teacher. So I just did everything to make my teachers like me. So like, if I were to take that out of the equation, every other subject that I struggled in, that was a terrible plan. Summative only situations were terrible, terrible situations for me. Yes.
Yes. And it is, I mean, to me, it's so obvious that's not learning.
Correct. It is.
It becomes a philosophical and like pedagogical conversation, which I just don't understand because that's not learning.
Oh, right.
That's just
totally.
Regurgitating. Like, then what the hell, why am I there as their teacher if they're just going to read something and take a test on it?
Do you know, Marie, I don't know who.
What's the point?
The other day,
yes,
my daughter said she came home from pre-K.
I know her. Yes.
You do. Listeners, if you've never met my daughter, she's 5. She's in pre-K at the Park District. It's like 2 hours every 3 days. It's some nonsense like that. She came home with a quiz score on the Very Hungry Caterpillar. I about died.
Did you fall off of your chair? Yes.
She got 4 out of 5. She got this, and she got it twice because she's in the morning and an afternoon. And they did the exact same thing, the morning and the afternoon, no matter if she hates it. And she got 4 out of 5 both times. The same question wrong.
That's really funny. What if she had gotten worse the second time? That would have been even
it was
funnier.
Just like,
right.
I had this moment of like what we're talking about right now of like, what on earth was the point of that? What was the point? Also, like we've never taken reading quizzes, multiple choice of any sort that I've ever seen to begin with. And like, I was like, have you ever heard of Down with the Reading Quiz, you guys? Like,
hey, we want to talk about something.
Like be quiet, like relax, but I could not relax.
Well, actually, I feel like we should say, so, okay, we have many people who are new to this podcast who might actually not know what we're talking about when we talk about Down with the Reading Quiz.
Let's start
or they may have like heard our ads on it or something, but this whole idea that summative assessments are completely and utterly pointless if they are not, I mean, here's my qualifier, if they are not properly aligned to formative assessments. There is a place and time. Like the AP exam is absolutely the summative of all summatives when you're talking about high school, especially. But like the number of formative assessments leading up to an AP exam is insane if you're doing it right. Right.
It's also 100% skill based, not conceptual. Right.
Right. So like, let's talk about the things that should have been talked about in our credentialing programs that may have been glossed over, may have been sort of talked about conceptually, but like weren't really worked through, right? Like this for me, the difference between formative and summative assessments, the use of assessments, the point of assessments, period, and in creating actually usable data in a classroom was something that I know I talked about, and I know I sounded like I know what I was talking about, but I'm really good at jargon. I'm really, really good at sounding like I know what I'm talking about and having no flipping idea. Do you find that as well, especially in like edubabble sorts of things? Like it's once you hit a certain point, it's easy to sound like you know what you're talking about while saying nothing.
And it wasn't even credentialing. I feel like that was how I survived the first 5 to 7 years of teaching. Was I always thought everyone around me knew more than I did.
Sure.
And I was hesitant to speak up with anything other than regurgitating what I think I was supposed to say.
Yeah, well, and there are some amazing credentialing programs out there. And my credentialing program was great. And it still didn't prepare me as I wish it had. Right? Yep. Like there are things that, and maybe it's just, I don't know. I'm not going to disqualify what I said. It did not prepare me the way that it should have and the way that I wished it had, especially now in my 17th year in the classroom as a quite veteran teacher. Like I know some stuff. Okay.
Well, I don't even know that it's the credentialing situation's fault. I think it's just like this like very systemic reliance on colleges haven't evolved, period. Yes. Like the system of college hasn't changed. Totally. And like that is part of the problem. That does not prepare us for being in the classroom. I can't even tell you. So the other day I tried, I was like last year, maybe I applied to teach at the community college.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It was like a composition course for students who didn't qualify to be in 101 yet.
Yeah.
And you know what they told me?
Right.
They said, there's the door. You don't have your master's in English. We don't want to talk to you. And I'm like,
you kidding?
I literally taught seniors at the high school. All these kids are coming to your school. Like, this is my specialty. And they're like, see ya. We want the certificate. And I'm like, that is what an idiotic.
No, it's dumb.
System.
Well, so let's down with the reading quiz. We started to talk about it and then we got a little bit sidetracked. So,
there's a reason we're riled, and there's a reason that we came up with solutions, right? Like that's exactly where this is going.
The reason that we came up with specifically this solution. So as Amanda and I were like starting our podcast and really like chit-chatting and getting closer as like new friends way back in the year 2020, we realized that our ideas and our philosophies were very much aligned when it came to assessment, which is, again, not the prettiest and most exciting part of teaching, but it should be.
Yeah.
Because it's what it's here for. And when we were talking about creating curriculum rehab, our signature course where we lead teachers through our entire method, every strategy we have, every step along the way, from beginning to end, actually from end to beginning, if you will, of creating a year-long curriculum map for whatever it is that you're teaching and all the little bits in between. We went, you know what's missing here is assessment. Like, you know what we really need to dive into is not summative assessments. People are great at papers. People are great at assigning projects, but it's preparing students for that. And it's making that end all summative easier on everybody and making it actually purposeful is where formative assessments come in. And that is where what we keep talking about down with the reading quiz came from. It's because like us saying there are better, more effective, less energy suck, and just all around shinier ways of assessing students along the way and making sure that their skills are being built and being able to like adjust and readjust along the way.
So I would say cornerstones, like this episode, what we really wanted to talk to you all about were mistakes that we see being made. So like the cornerstone, like there are the two biggest mistakes I would say we're trying to help remedy with this masterclass. It's a free masterclass where we will have a link to it in the show notes for you. Some of you have already taken it. Others of you haven't taken it yet. We want you to do that. But it's based on these two mistakes. Number one, the attitude that reading quizzes in particular should somehow catch students in the act of not behaving complicit. Like they're not doing what you told them to do, right?
You didn't comply. Yeah, I knew you didn't read.
Which again, Marie and I are raising our hands. Like I was raised in that era of the reading quiz was to serve me to catch kids in the act of not doing what they were supposed to do.
And then they would deserve to fail because they weren't doing it. Yes.
And even if we weren't so like witchy and finger pointy, like it was still like the purpose of them was to monitor student reading behavior.
Yeah.
That is a problem that continues to exist.
We're sensationalizing it a bit, but that's, if you really break it down, what is the point other than that? Okay, maybe we can say that a classic or typical reading quiz is because we are looking to assess their comprehension and their understanding. Sure. I will go out on that limb with you there. But then every day? Really? Like, how much comprehension if they're comprehending the first bit of it, do I need to know that they're comprehending the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth chapter? Or can I just know that they're comprehending the beginning and the middle and then the end? Do you know, like there's a different, why am I expending all of my energy creating multiple choice or fill in the blank or whatever quizzes to see what students do and don't comprehend? What's that getting me as their teacher?
I'd also like to know at what point we taught the students how to comprehend what they're reading.
Yes.
So we're also measuring an arbitrary skill that they're supposed to just be doing on their own. So even if that's the case, like that's fine as a measuring stick for us to learn from and to use, but not when we combine it with this attitude of, I gave you reading homework and you're not doing it. Right. And that we're
and here's your punishment.
And over time, and like that was how I was raised in English. And I still was kind of like, but I was a goody two shoes. So I like wanted to be impressive. But like the messaging though was that we read for quizzes and like that's what we read for. And even if we did independent reading at some point, there was still always a quote unquote like way to keep kids accountable. Accountability became the dominant part of the conversation, not our kids learning skills. What skills are we teaching? It became kids need to read X, Y, and Z. I'm going to quiz them on this. They're not reading. They're performing poorly on their quizzes. So now we need to read everything together out loud. And now English class is, I read entire books out loud and quiz you on them until we get to the end and write a paper. And then we do it all over again.
And then I slowly but surely murder your love for literature and stories.
Yikes.
Yikes.
So
mistake number one is murdering the love of literature and stories, because younger.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Young kids. We both have young kids. They've got it. They're excited. They are excited about reading. Yes. They're excited about stories. And then jump to the older kids. Some still have it, but for the most part, it has been beaten out of them. Again, we're not laying blame on anybody. We are sharing that burden because that's absolutely us. And that's why we created a masterclass that gives 3 different assessment keys to cracking that code. Like we get in down with the reading quiz, we get into 3 different types of assessments, the use for each type of assessment, the reasoning for each type of assessment, and then what you're going to get out of it, how much it's going to benefit, not just the kids, like whatever. Yes, totally. It's all about the children. But like as a teacher with multiple classes in the 40s of students, I don't know how I think I'm going to be taking care of things like all of these great philosophical things I'm about to start talking about, where I'm looking at their skills and their analysis and the way that they're building things and their comprehension. How do I expect to be able to do that if I'm not really strategic? Well, that's where what we talk about in Down with Reading Quiz comes up. That's where Sesame Street quizzes, which you've probably heard us talk about before. That's where one-pager quizzes, that's where paragraph chunk quizzes come from. Or that's also where they serve. That's the solution to that problem. They do all the things and they're still manageable, because that's then the flip side of that coin. I think the next mistake is going all in on, well, then I'm just going to look at skills. I'm only going to make things really personalized to every kid. And then I'm reading a short essay every few days for weeks on end for every single student and giving feedback. And that's just not sustainable. That's not realistic. Kids will get burnt out on that kind of an activity. So like the formative assessment, there's a very specific formula that makes it potent and usable in a classroom.
Over the course of 3 years of doing this podcast, Maria and I have talked a lot about structured work time and how to take those days that are quote unquote free days and make them more meaningful and focused for students. Because let's be honest, so often students don't know what to do with themselves on a work day. They end up wasting so much time and then they end up becoming behavioral nightmares. And whether you're giving students full work days, let's say at the end of a unit while working on a project, or you kind of have a system going where at the end of the class period, you want to give students time to work on something. From the majority of teachers that I hear from, these times of the day are going terribly. Students really just don't know how to self-manage that kind of freedom and that kind of time. And so that's why I started creating cafe mode timers. So cafe mode is very similar to the idea of Starbucks mode. We're just not going to get into the taking Starbucks branding and trademarking and all that. So we're just going to call it cafe mode. And you'll see in the timers that there's a variety of them. They're anywhere from 25 minutes to an hour long with just some chill instrumental music, some really peaceful and beautiful pictures. Some are travel themed, some are coffee shop themed, some are seasonal. I have a spring one, a winter one, like you name it. They're all out there on the YouTubes. And what makes them different from other classroom timers is that every screen has the expectations for cafe mode up on the screen. So at any point, you can point to the screen and tell students, hey, we're in cafe mode, don't forget. And that's just so critical to the success of our classroom. So if you're wondering, what does cafe stand for? It is this. C stands for calm and courteous. A stands for align priorities. F stands for focused and on task. And E stands for everyone's a stranger. So as I've worked and spent time building up these expectations with students, it's like any other structured time in my class. Let's take stations, for example, or centers, right? Depending on the grade level you're teaching. Students understand that when we do stations, they know what the volume level expectation is when they're working with small groups. They know that when they're rotating, what the volume level and the way we behave in those moments. They know that at the end of the period, there's going to be an expectation to share with the whole group. They know that when they get to a station, they have a limited time and they need to get the information from that station that they need before they move on. And there is no going back, right? So I've trained my students on this classroom structure. It's no different for a free work time, right? We're not going to do free work time anymore. We're going to do structured, focused, expectations-oriented, structured work time. And this changed everything for me when I started offering up free work time, because now I would say, we are going to have cafe mode at the end of today's class period for 15 minutes. And during cafe mode, you can work on task 1, task 2, or task 3. But because we're aligning our priorities, students are going to need to identify which of those priorities they're working on and show that during this time. If there's a conflict, right? If there's a problem, I have this set of expectations that I can then bring to a case manager, to a parent, to an admin, and say, this is what we expect during this time. And this is where the student is struggling to follow through. It changed everything. I cannot emphasize that enough. And so I hope these free timers on YouTube are just one more layer to adding to making your day a little bit easier and helping you in that process of training your students to respect the structures of class. Because once they understand what cafe mode is, you can show them when the times of class are appropriate to be more chill. Right? Maybe you're going to give them, if you want to give kids a free day, give them a free day. But if you want them to work, give them a cafe day, right? Like, make it clear which is your expectation. Are you really totally fine? Because I am. There are absolutely days where I'm okay that students are milling about, chit-chatting and brainstorming for a new project coming up. And if there's lost time, I'm not sweating it because maybe they just need it. And that's fine. We meet kids where they are. But if I really need something to get done, I'm going to call it a cafe day. And during our cafe day, everyone's writing their claim and everyone's coming up with 4 pieces of evidence, and it's due at the end of the cafe. So that is a different way to think about how we can get students to do independent work and still stay on track. Let's go back to the show.
So let's talk about a little bit of the big picture before we dig into more specific. So now that we've talked about the proper usage of no more summative until you really focus on your formatives, let's look at the big picture. And then I have a few things that even are mistakes within when you think you're doing it all right. I've got some Sesame Street quiz mistakes that I've made and learned from.
Oh, yes. Okay. So this second half of the episode, we are going to get into some of those formative assessment types. So if you have not yet taken Down with the Reading quiz, you can certainly listen to this episode, but it might make more sense if you go ahead and take the webinar and like actually sit through it, take your notes, invite a friend or two. It's always better to do that in groups. We'd love for you to send this episode to a friend and be like, yo, we need to take this webinar.
The number of teachers who have like reached out and said, oh my gosh, I wish I had watched that whole masterclass webinar years ago. Like,
yeah,
I saw you guys talk about it when it first came out, and I just thought, oh, well, we'll just see. Or, oh, I was really in it at the time. 30 minutes of my day, and it has completely changed the way I teach. And like, I mean, I've lost count. Dozens of teachers have said exactly that. This has changed the way I teach. I wish I had done it sooner.
We believe in you, and we believe in like the power of what this will do for your classroom. So I think that I think that technically like the second mistake, are we on number 2, I think?
We're on number 26. I don't know.
Yeah. We're going to call it, holy, you hear all those birds?
I really do. Are you actually in the aviary? Is that what it's called?
Goodness gracious. Spring has sprung. Happy hour. You all know all about springtime. Spring fever is happening over here at the Cardenas household. Yikes. Gonna be some baby birds pretty soon. Okay. Weird. Gross. Odd comment, but
That's
y'all
okay.
got it. No.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, mistake number 2 when it comes to assessments, specifically formatives, is panic writing them right before you have to give them.
Like, I'm getting a quiz. It's Friday. Like that.
Arriving at the moment where you're like, I probably should be giving a quiz, and then having to write it on the spot. Now, again, Marie and I are saying this, like we've made all these mistakes hundreds of times.
Oh yeah.
We also acknowledge that there are seasons and units where like you're just kind of in survival mode and like it's cool. But we also say that with like the responsibility and acknowledgement that like we have to also see those moments as like, this is not something that I want to continue and I need to find a solution to make it better. So arriving at that point means that there has been a break in the backwards planning process.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think in all of the things that we teach in curriculum rehab, this signature course that we have, I think that the most important and most powerful thing that we teach in this course is how to actually backwards plan different types of units, whether it's whole class or lit circles or research or writing, whatever the type of unit it is. It requires very careful backwards planning. And that's the spot where I think I needed someone like Marie and Amanda to zoom me out.
Yes.
So that I could see, okay, so I'm teaching Fahrenheit. All right, cool. So for the summative, I do want students to do something with complex characterization and the way that Montag changes from beginning to end. Like that's important to me in the summative because knowing that now, I haven't taught it yet, but knowing that now does help me in the way that I organize the units and the way that I organize my weeks. And it helps me think about, okay, so if my unit's going to be 6 weeks long, I have maybe 4 points in that journey where I want to touch in formatively on the progress, the changes that Montag is making up until the very end. And so if I know that, even just like post-it note, know that, like not, you don't even need to be more formally committed than that. That's going to help me write formative assessments that are not only meaningful, but actually are adding up to that end goal. So curriculum rehab is the solution for this big picture problem, because I think knowing the formatives and knowing the different styles, like that's great. But if you don't know how they go together to get to the end, that's where curriculum rehab, I think, comes in to solve that problem.
It goes back to what I was talking about earlier about my credential program taught me a lot about backwards planning. It taught me that backwards planning is where you start at the end and then you work your way back to the beginning to know where you're going. And that was it.
Right.
And so
you know it on the surface, like what it is.
So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to figure out what the summative is and then I'm going to go backwards. I mean, yeah, that's it by definition, but that's also what I try to get my students not to do, which is define the word with the word and other phrases that have the word in it. It's where you plan backwards. Yeah, no shit. Yeah, I know that's that gap between it's where you plan, but backwards. Okay. It's taking what skills are you at? What objectives do you need to hit? What holes are there in your curriculum? And how do you define all of those things? And then take all of that information and figure out what the end needs to be, and then figure out how to get there, and then put into place. Exactly. So that's what curriculum rehab is. It's that process that we had to muscle our way through to teach ourselves. And it's helping our fellow teachers in just helping articulate that for themselves. Like once you hear it and once you see it, it's so much easier. And that's where that all comes from. And like, truly, yes, summative assessment is the beginning part of that because it's the end, starting with the end in mind. But that won't matter if you don't know that they can get there with formative assessments.
Well, and I think what goes without saying too is like that same mistake can happen, not just with formatives, but with summatives. Like I just got to the end of my unit and I need an assessment.
I need something. But do I?
You're like, you're already there and you're like, I need an idea for an essay prompt. Like,
like, crap. What are we talking about? I know. Well, so let's talk. Okay. I also promised the friends out there listening some mistakes. If you're doing it all right, you've gone through curriculum rehab with us. You have, not that you're doing it wrong if you haven't gone through curriculum rehab, but you're like doing the things that we're talking about. You're bobblehead nodding along with us right now. And you've had a Sesame Street quiz flop, right? Or you've had a 1-pager quiz that took the entire 90-minute class period when it was supposed to take 15. Both of which have happened in my own classroom. And I've gone, what's that all about? It's exactly what Amanda's saying. It's when I've said, I've got this. And I've been teaching it both times. In fact, it's when I was teaching new units and 2 different units, but still new to me, just formed them, had everything planned about 2/3 of the way through the unit, had all of the assessments already made, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to that one Friday morning where you're burnt out and you've got a donut in your mouth and you go, holy, I haven't made the Sesame Street quiz yet for today. And then I grab 4 random items that I haven't really thought through. And I haven't really, really made like a couple of different examples of them in my own head first. And I throw them out at students. Will they make answers? Will the Sesame Street quiz in and of itself absolutely assess their reading? Yes. But will it connect to our like essential question and like the end, the summit? No, unless I'm really lucky, which I'm generally not. These are things that should be prepared ahead of time so that you can think it through. You know, like that's my biggest mistake there. I did a 1-pager quiz one time on my heroes and villains unit that we've talked about on the podcast quite a bit. And it was like, oh gosh, I meant to make that 2 weeks ago. I have an idea for it. You know what? I've got it skeletoned out. It'll be fine. I went and I made a 1-pager that asked students to do way too much. And mind you, this was in like what, my 15th year of teaching? Like this was not that long. It was like a couple years ago. We talked about this unit on the podcast. I gave students way too much to do in a 1-pager quiz. It was like a 4-pager quiz. And they took an hour and a half and still didn't feel like they were done. And they were so stressed out. And I felt so bad. And then I'm in there going, you guys, it's okay. Just don't do the second half of it. And some kids can handle that and like pivot.
Yeah.
And other kids go, well, I have to finish. And I'm like, I'm literally the one who told you to do it. And I'm telling you not to do it. Like they can't pivot like that.
No.
Yeah. I don't know how to qualify that mistake other than don't be an idiot and forget what you were supposed to do.
I think a mistake that can also come right along with what you're saying is the opposite, is overthinking some of these quizzes. You know, especially with Sesame Street, there is a danger of overthinking it too, or kind of talking yourself out of probably a really good question. You know, like I
think it's too easy. That's part of the reason actually that specific Sesame Street quiz was not written, is because I was like, oh no, I can do better. And then I didn't.
Well, so I get this question a lot from people about, can you look at this? I have a Facebook group, and every now and again, people will, ask for Sesame Street quiz question ideas, and, they're worried about it being too easy. And so like my advice for you, if you're in that camp, is then let it be easy. Let the kid wow you. And you'll be surprised. They probably won't.
No, well, but like, let them have an easy win. Let it feel easy for them. Let them then challenge themselves to make it better. Like there are ways to fix that. And
there are ways to fix that. And I think that in the rubric, if you're using the rubric that I share, then I think that you can make the distinction between the A and the B answer really more scaffolding, more difficult over time when you're looking especially at the outlier sentence.
Yeah.
That sentence that's defending the outlier really takes a lot of energy to construct well. So that's a place where, like, again, like, let the question be easy and put the pressure on the kids to write that outlier sentence really cleanly. And even the connection sentence, like, it's also, we're assessing for the most part, right, their comprehension at this point and the reading side of things, but it's also a writing practice for them. And we can really, I think, lean into that part of the rubric if you're worried about it being too easy. I wouldn't worry about that. That's not a mistake. Let it go.
I agree. I agree too. That's the other thing too, is like, then when that one Sesame Street quiz bombed, I was like, you know what? Write your own. Your next step is to write your own. And let's see how you can make that connect to our essential question. And like, boom, this wonderful lemonade came out of my last ditch effort, mouthful of donut lemons.
Shocking. Other mistakes I've seen with paragraph chunk quizzes, kind of the same idea as like, I think I'm making it too easy. You're probably not.
No.
I think that my paragraph chunk, I've given the students too much and it's not hard enough. I don't think so. Again, like, that's part of, especially if you're at the beginning of the unit, let it be. If you're giving them a lot, let them fill in the pieces that you want to see. And I've talked about this a lot in curriculum rehab too. Maria does as well. We talk a lot about how repetition is one of the keys to student growth and success.
Yeah.
With a paragraph chunk quiz, people will ask me like, okay, so should one week I give them the claim, the next week I give them the evidence, the next week, you don't need to keep switching things up to keep it fresh. This goes the same with lesson planning. It's the same with assessments. If you want to every single week give them the claim statement and they have to write the rest of the paragraph, do it the same way every single time. Let them get good. Like, let them actually get good. Let them get to a point where you're like, wow, I'm proud of them. We so often like interrupt their progress before we let them get to that point that we're always kind of like, they're not writing how I want them to. Well, we haven't given them a lot of practice doing the same thing over and over again.
We haven't let them refine. Yeah. Like, we've let them try it. And if they weren't successful the first time, maybe they could try it twice, but like, let them refine.
Let them refine. Don't stress about that. And there's always the next unit to make revisions. You don't have to I feel like I always felt that pressure too. I don't know if that was part of this culture of like the reading quiz gotcha culture, but I felt like there was also this pressure to be constantly like super present and adaptive to every single piece of information that I ever got from students. And like, that also we can take a breath on, because we can look at broad strokes behaviors to make adjustments. We don't have to look at
that's a heck of a lot more effective, frankly, than the nitty gritty, because the nitty gritty has so many variables.
Yes.
How was that kid feeling that day? How was I feeling that day? Was there extra long overhead announcements? Was it windy? Was it a full moon? Like, there's so many different factors that go into the little pieces, so that if you take every piece of information and data that kid gives you and you try to be responsive to it, you're just spinning your wheels. Look at the big overall. It gives you a little bit more to go on.
So we can call that probably 5. Can we call that 5 mistakes, right? Like,
I teach English language arts. I don't count things.
So if we were to sort of sum up what we went over today, it would be like, let's first of all get out of the gotcha mindset. Go take down with the reading quiz.
Second, take a look at what we're talking about.
Right, backwards plan and line things up. If you haven't checked out Curriculum Rehab, check it out. It might be perfect for you for a summer project. It might be perfect for a winter project. It's just going to be good for you to have in your pocket. So take a look at Curriculum Rehab to do the backwards planning work. And then once you're into the quiz writing process, number 3, 4, and 5 is like, you're going to make mistakes along the line. Maybe don't ask kids to do too much. Don't overthink them, and let it be easy if it's going to be easy. I can call
don't
that 5.
overcommit yourself. Yes.
Right. We'll call it 5.
Yes. Yeah, sure. That's 5.
Sure. I like that.
Sounds like 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. As we said before, friends, we are linking Down with the Reading Quiz pretty much everywhere right now, because it's a great time to brush up on assessments. And it's like, this is the time of year where I start looking back and like pulling all of those Post-its that I've put on things and looking at all my random notes that I've written and the emails that my team have sent back and forth. So we will put that link pretty much everywhere, but especially in the show notes to this episode. take a look at that. If curriculum rehab is something that you are interested in, maybe your team wants to do it. Maybe your school is looking for ways to do, they've got some PD funds. This is, again, that time of year where we start looking at spending money that won't roll over, right? Yep. In our department funds. We can totally work with you. So take a look at that as well. We will link curriculum rehab information in our show notes as well. Let's go assess some stuff.
I love it. I think
what do you think?
It's always assessment season.
Yeah, it's always assessment season. Summatives are what was the thing that we were going to do?
Summatives are shirt. Stupid. Tattoos? Oh no, that was a different episode.
No, that was a different episode. No, we were talking about wearing shirts that said the summative assessment is dead.
Yeah, it's dramatic.
So dramatic. All right, friends. Have a wonderful week at school. We will see you next time.
Bye. Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here and have a great week at school.